Hey everyone, Tankenstein here. In this video, I'll be reviewing the MB.5. This is a currently 5.0 BR Rank 4 premium fighter in the Great Britain Air Force's tech tree. This vehicle currently costs 3,850 Golden Eagles when not on sale, and comes with 15 backups. With that said, in this video, I'll be going over everything that you need to know about this fighter, including its stats, how it plays, I'll go over its strengths and weaknesses, I'll give it some scores in several key areas, and then I'll give my final recommendation, and if I feel if this vehicle is worth purchasing or not. With that said, if you like this kind of video, please consider subscribing to my channel, but without further ado, let's get into it. Now to start, I'll place its stat card here on the side of the screen. Important things to note are its top speed, its armament, and its lack of secondary ordnance. Now for how it plays. In short, the MB.5 plays like an interceptor that lost some weight and wants to be a fighter. This is to say the MB.5 is fast, has a heavy armament, and can turn decently well, though not as well as other similar BR fighters. A Spitfire, the MB.5 is not. Because of this, the MB.5 thrives by going after enemies that you can separate from their groups, be it a lonesome enemy fighter, a strike aircraft, or even a bomber. Its armament of 4 Hispano Mark II cannons will make very short work of any enemy plane that they come into contact with. Heck, even if you get caught up in a furball while using the MB.5, it can still turn with most enemy fighters at least for some time, before having its energy bled dry, as the MB.5 loses speed and turns quicker than most other fighters. This lends to the MB.5 being a great boom and zoom fighter, as it can climb decently well enough, and once it reaches sufficient altitude, it can dive down faster than most planes at this BR and destroy an enemy or two along the way with its tremendous firepower. Again, even if caught in a turning fight with another fighter, not all is lost with this aircraft. It's just that you can't expect to hang with things like Zeros and BF-109s, especially if you've already been turning for some time, or you came into the fight at low speed. Otherwise, the MB.5 is unfortunately a one-trick pony, as it cannot carry bombs or rockets, which means that it cannot destroy bases. Don't get me wrong, it does that one trick that it has up its sleeve, being that it's a somewhat heavier fighter, extremely well, but that's really all that it has. Now for close air support, the MB.5 is almost useless. Because it has no secondary ordnance, you can only do strafing runs against ground vehicles. Again, don't get me wrong, this can be extremely effective versus light or open top vehicles. The probability is that, however, those vehicles oftentimes have some sort of machine gun that can damage or destroy your plane if they spot you as you're going in for a strafing run. Aside from these targets, you really can't do anything outside of destroying tracks on enemy tanks. The best thing that you can do aside from shooting at the occasional M18 or similar vehicle is to provide air cover against enemy CAS planes, which is something that, thankfully, the MB.5 can do very well. For CAS, however, this plane is largely, though not technically entirely, a stinker. Now with that said, let's get into its strengths and weaknesses, and first for its strengths. It has a roll rate that is somewhat above average. Second, it has a very good cannon armament of 4 Hispano Mark IIs. Third, it has a better turning rate than what the stat card states. Fourth, this vehicle has a great dive rate due in part to its excellent engine and also somewhat heavy weight. Fifth, it has a great top speed and straight line performance. Sixth, the MB.5 lacks wing fuel tanks, which will help in fire prevention. And finally, the MB.5 features premium RP and SL bonuses. And now for its weaknesses. First, this vehicle lacks any secondary ordnance, relegating you to only having your cannons. Second, the engine will begin to overheat when at full throttle after a few minutes of use. Third, the climb rate feels slightly worse than what the stat card states, though it isn't outright bad, it's just decent at best. Fourth, this vehicle has poor energy retention when in turns. And finally, this vehicle has weak flaps that break at low speeds. Now with that said, let's get into how I score it in several different areas. And first for dogfighting/ARB, I give it a 7 out of 10. While not necessarily outstanding insofar as maneuverability is concerned, the MB.5 can turn quite well, albeit while losing substantial amounts of energy fairly quickly. Its climb rate is okay, but not as good as what the stat card might want you to think. The MB.5 does, however, have an excellent armament that will allow you to destroy many types of enemies with ease, from other fighters to even bombers. This, along with its excellent overall speed and dive rate, makes the MB.5 into a formidable plane in ARB. Unfortunately, it cannot carry secondary ordnance, so this plane is strictly one that will have to kill other planes or destroy ground emplacements and vehicles with your cannons alone. Now for close air support, I give it a 2 out of 10. Unsurprisingly, the MB.5 is terrible in regards to CAS. It has no secondary ordnance that can carry, which means that it relies purely on its cannons. Thankfully, however, its cannons are good enough to be able to wipe out open-top vehicles, like many SPAA at this BR, or destroy tracks or other modules on more heavily armored vehicles. While not absolutely useless in CAS, the main role of the MB.5 in ground RB is to provide air cover versus enemy aircraft, and to damage or possibly destroy ground targets when possible, prioritizing open-top vehicles. Otherwise, this vehicle probably shouldn't be in ground RB matches unless you absolutely need it. Now overall, I give the MB.5 a 6.25 out of 10. As one could imagine, I'm not placing much weight on my close air support score for this aircraft, simply because this plane is clearly not meant to be in that role. It does factor into my overall score, but when playing this vehicle how it should be played in the game mode in which it should be played, the MB.5 is quite good. It is by no means perfect, as it loses energy very quickly and can only keep up with more agile enemies in a turn somewhat briefly. A smart player can easily get 3 or more kills per match with consistency while using this vehicle. It isn't amazingly good, but it has such a powerful hammer of an armament mixed with otherwise good flight characteristics that it's hard to do poorly in this plane, at least when playing in air battles. Now, with that said, for my recommendation, do I recommend the MB.5? Well, as a fighter, yes, this is a very good plane, and I recommend it for those that like big guns and high speed in that role. Otherwise, this is not a versatile aircraft, as it lacks secondary ordnance and is somewhat limited in what it can do. Other aircraft of this rank, specifically the Wyvern, though also the more expensive Hornet Mark I as well, are much more versatile and are arguably just as good versus aircraft, with the Wyvern still remaining king in both air and ground domains, as well as being excellent versus naval, if that's your thing. Probably the best way to put it is that the Wyvern is give or take as good as the MB.5 versus air, except that the Wyvern is also excellent versus ground and even naval targets, whereas the MB.5 has absolutely no business fighting against those types of enemies. I'll place my Wyvern link down below in case you want to check that out. With that said, I was surprised by how good the MB.5 ended up being versus air, as I have around a 2.5 KD with it, which is awesome for such a large, somewhat heavy fighter. Otherwise, again, it just isn't versatile and won't handle business against anything armored on the ground. The MB.5 is an excellent grinder, but I will say to take the Wyvern any day of the week over it, whereas I'd probably rank the Hornet somewhat similarly with the MB.5, as it is more versatile but also costs a bit more than the MB.5. So with that said, I do recommend this plane, though only if it's on sale, and again, primarily for people who like fighters. I do, however, give it my Tankenstein seal of approval, as it is great at being a fighter, which is really all that it's meant to do. Now with that said, thank you all so much for watching. Please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing, as I appreciate all of that, and it helps my channel to grow. Let me know what you guys think about the MB.5 in the comments below, and if you take any vehicle above it, or maybe even after this vehicle. Either way, thanks again, and I'll see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.